Good day, ma'am. I am Mayor Alimay Sarobia Bete FSM 2D. These are the postmodern and modern culture in a worldwide. This paper revisits Frederick Jameson writing on postmodernism and periodizing the 1960s in order to begin to construct a historical framework for popular music of 1960s. Using reference to the Beatles as a case study. As part of this construction, reference is also made to Foucault and episteme. The central claim is that popular music of the 1960s featured a shift from a common musical language to more pluralized, differentiated stylistic identity. This shift is seen to mirror the move to a postmodern cultural and critical condition. In turn, postmodernism had been cultural circulation since 1970s, based on Keller 1991. It is the only late 1950s and 1960s that we see in the beginning of what is now understood as postmodernism. Lyotard famously defines the postmodern as incredulity towards meta-narratives, where meta-narratives are understood as totalizing stories about history and the goals of the human race that ground and legitimize knowledge and cultural practices. Francois Lyotard argues that all aspects of modern societies rely on grand narratives or a sort of meta-theory that seeks to explain the belief system that exists. She contributed the debate on postmodernism is that postmodern condition it published in France in 1979. Translated into English in 1974, Lyotard, the postmodern condition is marked increases status of knowledge in the Western societies. Baudrillard's postmodernism theory is that in the modern world, what something represents has become more important than what it actually is. According to based on Keller 1991, has achieved guru status throughout the English-speaking world. They claim that Baudrillard has emerged as one of the most high-profile postmodern theorists. Baudrillard's claim that we have reached a stage in social and economic development in which it is no longer possible to separate the economic culture. Frederick Jameson outlined a dialectic theory of literary criticism in his Marxism and Form in 1971. Drawing on Hegelian categories such as the notion of totality and connection of abstract and concrete. Such criticism recognizes the need to see its object of analysis within a broad historical context, acknowledge its own history and perspective, and seeks the profound inner form a literary text. Is an American Marxist cultural critic who has written a number of very influential essays on postmodernism. Jameson differs from other theorists his insistence that postmodernism can best be theorized from within a Marxist or neo-Marxist framework. Postmodern music is music in the art music tradition produced in the postmodern era. It also describes a music that follows aesthetical and philosophical trends of postmodernism. As an aesthetic movement, it was formed partly in reaction to modernism, but is not primarily defined as oppositional to modernist music. Postmodernists question the tight definition and categories of academic disciplines, which they regard simply as the remnants of modernity. might highlight any number of different cultural texts and practices, example, music, video, advertisement, film, and etc. Postmodern television is related to the art and philosophy of postmodernism. Postmodern media rejects the idea that any media product or tech is of a greater value than other. Anything can be art, anything can deserve to reach the audience and culture itself. As there is no longer anything new to produce and distribute, the distinction between media and reality has collapsed, and we now live in reality defined by images and representations. Television, like pop music, does not a period of modernism to which it can be posed. But as Jim Collins 1992 point out, television is often, often seen as the quintessence of postmodern culture. Transition or society from traditional to modern to postmodern is marked by a new definition of the concept of truth and authority, which are now understood to mean near freedom to choose for every person. Therefore, from this perspective, such a change in values primarily means a challenge in the instruments of legitimization of the values themselves. Moving from a credibility, indisputability attributable to exclusive tradition and authority to a sort of toned down credibility based on the multiplicity of choices available to individuals. This it disturbed many of the old certainties surrounding question of cultural value. The postmodernism return to question of value has witnessed increased interest in the work of the Pierre Bourdieu in 1984. In Chapter 1, Bourdieu argues that distinction of culture is a significant aspect in the struggle between dominant and subordinate groups in society. Said to be becoming postmodern is its increasing globalization, perhaps the dominant view of globalization and culture. The first problem with globalization and cultural Americanization is that it operates with a very reductive concept of culture. It assumes that economic success is the same as cultural imposition. Postmodernists see the media as central to globalization and emphasize the positive effects media globalization has on society. Jenkins describes cultural convergence as an explosion of new forms of creativity at the intersection of various media technologies, industries, and consumers. The way in which we find ourselves affected by different medium is leading us towards a digital renaissance. Jenkins believes that media culture is allowing us to be a part of the media. We experience and interactivity is becoming an integral part of the industry. Media culture gives average people the tools to achieve, annotate, appropriate, and recirculate content. Jenkins observed top-down corporate-driven process and a bottom-up consumer-driven process. Convergence culture is the result of three factors. First, concentration of media ownership. Second, technological change. And the last factor involves the consumers of media.